Alright, so at this point in the animation or rigging stage, we should be pretty much set with our robot. If I go and I just turn my extra stuff off over here, like the door mechanics I don't need, the environment, interior, exterior, there we go. I should be back to where I just have the robot. And of course I need the robot controls, there we go. And if I grab his foot and I move it, everything works there. If I grab his knee, that rotates there. Now, there are some limitations to this rig. It's not a 100% going to work all the time rig. If you look at, like, for instance, one of these things, if I look to the spine, I want to rotate him, you see I can't rotate it this way. This way works fine, as does this way. As you get more comfortable with rigging, you kind of figure out how things are going to be set up. So one thing I could do for this is I can take my pelvis control here, and I could add an attribute and call it spine twist. And you know all that stuff, unless you've forgotten it. And then in the outliner, I can go find my do not touch, go find my spine IK handle, and there's an attribute called twist right here. And if I go in here and I grab twist and I middle drag, you'll see that it's going to do exactly that. It's going to twist the spine, which is what we want to happen. So I could just do a simple set driven to control, or an expression or whatever to control this twist, controlling that, and then just having this spine twist being that controller. So that's what I'm going to do real quick. You don't need to see it because it's basically the same stuff we've already done. There you go. So now I have a control that I could manipulate this thing with as well. Okay, so not a huge deal, just something I wanted to point out just so you're aware of it. But again, this isn't a 100% rig. This isn't the same rig you could use for every single model. You really have to customize it per model, per job, per whatever. And you probably found some tricks along the way, or realized some things along the way that maybe will help you out in other things as well. And that's just how the process is going to go. I couldn't teach you every single thing about rigging every single kind of character, because every character is going to be different. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to animate this guy. So if I go back to turn the stuff that I need on, I don't need, like, if I made a no render layer where I have like the ball. I don't need that ball to render, so I just turn that off. Okay, and then the robot controls we'll need. I don't need them right now. Setup junk, we don't need that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my M right here. Let me just move it away from that stuff. Then I'm just going to reset my settings. And that thing should be going down. There we go. Something happened. I had to reload it. Alright, so there's my access panel working. Our exterior lights are set up. Everything's set up. So we're good, happy, wonderful. Now there's other stuff that we're going to be doing later on. I just don't want to get into it on this one just because it's kind of like an overload type thing for this kind of setup. So we're just going to ignore some of the stuff. But eventually we'll be using these character sets when we get into the next section of our stuff. Okay, but for now we're just going to ignore these. But typically when you do any kind of big animation like we're going to be doing, not that it's huge, but bigger, you want to use character sets. Okay, so we're just going to basically just go through from start to finish and set this thing up. Now our goal with this is we're going to come in here. These lights are going to come on. The exterior lights are going to come on. We're going to come over here to the access panel. Oops. Let me grab my M. Deselected. The exterior lights are going to come up. The access panel is going to come up. The digits are going to get pressed. We want to make sure we can see that. There we go. The door is going to open. So stuff is happening behind the scenes. If you remember, we got the little glow things happening there. We got these things kind of twisting. There we go. And then we have our interior lights are going to power up. And then we have our upper lights are going to power up. And then we're going to go through and we're going to do all of our robots lights. Now on this guy, I didn't set those up on here, but obviously you can use your imagination as to what that is going to look like. You're going to have just the lights coming on from the top to the bottom. I actually have, I'll borrow one of my students' videos. This is this is one of the kind of like what we're going to be doing. Okay, you can see the lights are off, the lights come up, the door opens, we doesn't have the rest of the stuff in there because this is for a different class. The interior lights come on. Notice how they flicker on. It's not that you just come up, they kind of like flicker on. And then we go into the robot and you can see that his stuff is like powering up. And that's what we want to have. It's just all this stuff kind of powering up from top to bottom as our camera rolls through and shows all that stuff happening. Okay, so that's what the robot powering up is going to look like. And then once that's happened, then the robot's going to walk out of the door and just kind of operate some of his mechanics. Okay, so he'll walk out and then he'll move around some of his stuff just to test it out, and then that's going to be it. All right, so we're going to start off at the very beginning. So let me reset all this. There we go. And I want to get a good sense of timing on this. So before I even set up any of this stuff here, I want to do my camera work. Okay, so I'm going to create a new camera. Panels, perspective, new. I'm going to call this render cam. I'll call it render cam 1 because we may end up with several cameras. Okay, and your render settings are already set up. So if I go in here, this is already set to 960 by 540. So I'm going to hit the blue ball, and I'm just going to kind of frame this, and we're going to come into the scene. Okay, so again, the lights are going to be off to start, and they're going to start up. So I'm just going to set a key here for my camera. I'm going to just count. You know, how long is this going to take for me to get in here and get to this access panel? Okay, so maybe that would take, if I'm out here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, that's too long. Let's go a little bit quicker. 1, 2, 3. That's a little bit better. All right, so I'm going to go a little bit longer than that. So I'll go to 110, let's say. And we're doing 30 frames a second, so this is a little bit between 3 and 4 seconds. And I'm going to come in on this access panel pretty close, like that. There we go. So here, and I'm going to come in. Okay, so I can hit play just to see how that's looking. Okay, if I want accurate representation, obviously I'd do a play blast. Right click, play blast, just like we did on the bouncing ball and the other ones. Scale 100, play blast. And then I'll just hit escape when it hits 110. There's no sense in having it go through that extra couple frames. There we go. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to come in here. I mean, I could tweak this later too, but I'm just going to go to the graph editor. And I don't like my camera to start off going slow and then coming in fast and then slowing down. I don't like to have the slow in at the beginning. I always like to make sure this is linear. Okay, that way I get kind of like the camera's already moving. And then it gives me a little bit slower time on the end of it. Just a little bit longer to hold it. Okay, I think I'll go in there and just exaggerate that a little bit longer. You just take some of these bigger ones, and just glide that down. This way I get to the end a little bit quicker, and I hold it there a little bit slower, or a little bit longer. I don't need the scale, so it's not going to do anything. Right now the rotate's not doing anything. Alright, so let's see. There we go. So this gives me a little bit of time here to kind of power these things up as I'm coming in. I think this one here I want to just taper it back a little bit. and this one. I think these two are just moving a little bit too quick. And these are all flat, just making sure. Okay. There we go. I'm happy with the way that's turned out. Okay, good. All right, so obviously I'm going to have to get here and just hold this for a few seconds, maybe 180 or so. All right, but I don't want to just stop. I like to just have a little bit of movement. So from 110 to 180, let's say that's how long it takes to punch the code in. So that'll be 1 second, 2 seconds, and 10 frames. Okay. So I'm just going to move my camera just slightly. Just like that. Okay, I'm trying to keep this somewhat centered, and then set another key on it. Okay, so now we come in, and we go there. Now I want to make sure that transition is a little bit nicer. So again, we just go through, and we just look at these, and just try to smooth this transition out, just so we don't have a stopping and starting. And what I can do with this one is maybe just nudge it back a couple frames. So I just move this keyframe back a little bit. All right, let's see this, how this looks. Coming in. All right, maybe a little bit too much rotation in the Y direction, it looks like. I'm going to make this one linear and just see how that looks. There we go. It looks like we have a pretty good transition here. I think I might just want to take my translate X and just soften this a little bit more. Nope, I don't like that. Now if I make this spline, which is what I did just to see, it's gonna like jump past it and come back, and that just looks funny. So fix that. There we go. All right. So now we hit it and go a little smoother. All right, so that's good. Okay, so that's gonna be my first camera move, just kind of coming in and doing that. So render cam 1, I'm gonna do from 1, I'm gonna say 1 to 180. That way I know how long I'm rendering this camera from. And then I'll do a cut and show the other stuff. That's good. So let me go to my master controller. And from 1 to 180, or from 1 to 110, is when I need to have the access panel opening up. So let's go here to my exterior lights. I'll set a key at the beginning. And at 110, this thing is going to be open. Okay, so let's say 90 is when it starts to open. So at 90 is where the exterior lights are going to be on. So I'll key that up to 10. So from 1 to 90, those exterior lights are coming on. But I don't want to just do a basic transition. I look at my graph editor. I don't want it to be just like, whoop, the lights are on. Okay, I want to have some jitteriness in here. So what I can do is I can just go randomly throughout and just key this thing. Okay, so I'm just randomly setting some keyframes in here. Okay, and then on my graph editor, now I can just grab these and just kind of offset them a little bit. There we go. And then I'll make this maybe, I can make it linear and just give that a try and see how that looks. So I don't think it'd be very, like, you know, glowy. Maybe at the end here it's a little bit softer. There's a little bit more of a transition of it coming up. Maybe even at the beginning there's a little bit of it warming up. I think the rest of these might be pretty much just kind of like jittery booting up. Okay, so then from 90, that's when the access panel is going to start, to 110. Access panel is going to open. So set another key. And then from 110, digits pressed. All right, so 110, we're setting digits pressed to 0. And then our end of our camera move at 180, we're going to set digits pressed to, I believe it was like 60. There we go. We'll set another key there. So now we can turn on our render settings. Viewport 2.0, we'll wait 15 minutes till this gets done thinking. There we go. We'll do a play blast. Not that we're going to see the lights flicker or anything like that. Then we can see this. And see our access panel coming in. Thinking, thinking, thinking. There we go. The access panel opens. And then the numbers get pressed. And then we hit escape. And then we watch it. Let it go through the first time. See how it's going to play. That looks pretty good. It's a little bit quick at the beginning. We could slow that down. I don't want to slow it down too much because otherwise we're going to take forever for us to render. Okay, so we can see all the buttons getting pushed. We can see the code getting entered. That's good. All right, so that's render cam 1. So now I'm going to make another render camera. And this one's going to be called render cam 2. And this one, we want to show the door mechanics opening. So it's going to be kind of like back here-ish. I'm going to turn the blue circle on. And this is going to be like that. Like that. There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to go from 180. Set a key. And then however long this door mechanics thing is going to take. These things come down here. This thing whirs and the door opens up. So maybe like 100 frames, 3 seconds. This is the future. We don't want the doors to take forever to open. So now I go to 280, I set a key. And now I can see that stuff just kind of moving like that. Okay, so that looks pretty good like that. I don't need to really do a play blast every time. I'm just, you know, you could do that if you really want to. So now at 180, I'm going to go in and grab my master controller. Click on key selected for that. Go to 280. Crank it up all the way. Set another key there. Okay. Now, obviously we can see the robot here, but our goal is that we won't see the stuff inside there because it'll be dark, and then we click the lights on. So 180 to 280. Now this is just your own preference. Do you want to, you know, animate one camera here and then have another camera zoomed in? Whatever. It's up to you for that. This is just my recommendation, or just, you know, one way to do it, I guess. All right, so then the interior lights are going to come on, the upper lights are going to come on. We're going to do the same exact thing that we did in the other one, okay? So figure out how far you want these things to be. Interior lights, maybe they don't take as long. The upper lights can just kind of power in, but the interior lights will be the ones that kind of jittery in a little bit. Nothing as crazy as the intro. So let's say 280 here. And then let's go to our camera first. That's our camera sliding here. So I'm just going to keep it at 360 and maybe start to come in a little bit. Okay, and again, just go through and smooth out that transition, and then I'll animate the lights. And then just hit them one at a time. Just see which ones have motion on them, and just try to smooth that motion out. That looks pretty smooth there. Let's go back to the beginning and make sure that all these are linear at the beginning. There we go. Alright, let's just see how that looks. So now it's coming in, good. So now from 280 to 360 is when those other lights are going to be flickering on and off. So interior lights on, upper lights on. Go to 360. Put them both on. And then go to the graph editor. Now here's another thing I can do to add some randomness to these lights is I can use this insert key, and as long as I have the graph selected I can just middle click and it'll just add keys in here. It's usually a little bit easier than doing it the other way, and then I can just move these around. So I'm not going as crazy as the other one. I do have some jitteriness here, but nothing, like I said, as crazy as the other. Let me flatten these guys out, flatten this guy out, and close that. Okay, and so now we have our one camera, we have our second camera. Gorgeous. Okay, now we're not going to be able to see any of the door mechanics kind of moving around. So as far as the assignment goes, we're just going to ignore them. This is something that you could animate later, kind of showing some. You could animate this thing kind of like a wireframe transition on top of your stuff, which I'll show at some other point, just not for the assignment. Okay, I'll see this because eventually you're going to turn in your entire project folder or your final scene, so I'll be able to see all that stuff happening. But for this, we're not really going to see it. Okay, so there's that, and we go all the way to 360, that's where it was, 360. And that's our last keyframe on here to get all this stuff to work. Now I'd recommend going through and just doing a low quality rendering. So this is already set up to like low settings, -1 here on the common tab. This is set to 1 to 400. You can set it to 360. Make sure you pick your cameras. And I'll add another camera in here so we can do both cameras. And render cam 2 is going to be from 180 to 360. Alright, so now we have render cam 2, which we'll rename render cam 2 181 or 180 to 360. Okay, so that's render cam 2. So let me reload that. There it is. Now by default this is going to render everything from 1 to 360 for both cameras. Obviously I don't want that to happen. So what I would do is, the ghetto way to do this is I delete this camera and I set this to 180. And okay, this is render cam 1 to 180. And then I would save my scene as render cam 1 render it out. And then come back, open it up again, change this to render cam 2, change that to 180 to 360, and then render that out. Okay, in a separate scene. Okay, just as a tester. Now you could also use this by frame. You could put that up to 4 and renumber your frames. Make sure you always click that when you do a by frame. And then that way you can test that out to see how this is going to look. Okay, this is just a tester. Once you're actually ready to go, you'll render out every single frame that you need. The quality settings will be up a little bit, maybe 0 and 2. You can leave the final gather settings there. Make sure this is at Mitchell. So 2 here, Mitchell there. This does have render passes in here. If you don't want to use the render passes, just render out the master layer by clicking on this green button. If you want to use the render passes, just make sure that you have all the objects on color 1. Or color, not color 1. So on color, I would just go through, or on, sorry, master layer, I would go through and turn all this stuff off up here, except for geometry. And I would make sure I grab all my geometry and make sure that that's on my color layer. So I would add it to the color layer. And then I would also make sure all my lights are on there too. So I would also go through and turn off the geometry, grab the lights, and make sure those are also on the color layer. And I would just render the color layer. Color layer 1, not 1, but color layer this one, is already set up with all the render passes. So you're good to go. You can just render it out from there. The other one is not. So that was just one I was playing around with that you could play around with also if you want to do anything extra fancy. Okay. Now you could also set these things up so that if you were doing a more advanced setup, render cam 2 could be rendered on this pass, and then render cam 1 could be rendered on the other pass. So you could do that as well. Okay. So once you have the door animation, you have that going, you can test it out. Then you're just going to do a robot animation. So you make a new camera, and then you're just going to animate the robot coming out of here. So we don't know how long this is going to take, but we want to animate the lights on the robot, and we want to animate the robot coming out of there. So maybe we want to start at the top just like that video had it, or at the bottom depending on how you want to do that, and then just animate yours. So I'm going to start at 360. I'm going to make sure I have my camera selected. I'll call it render cam robot. I'm going to set a key. At 360, I'll go to, let's say 560. And then set a key down here. Make sure I don't turn these things on when I render it. Okay, so that's the 560. And then maybe I'll go to 800 for the next part. Okay. So once I'm at 560 or 360 to 560, I would come into my master controller. There it is. Oops, there. Make sure I can select it. There it is. Okay. And as I'm sliding down here, I would just go through and say, okay, we'll just pretend this is the visor. I would turn the visor's lamp on. And then as I came down, I would turn on the lamp for the chest, and then the shoulders, and then the the shoulders, and then the biceps, and then I think I have something on the forearms. Yep, and do the forearms too. And I would just make sure that these things are in frame as I'm doing this, or they're just coming into frame as I start animating these things, because you don't want to animate them and then realize, whoops, they're not even in the frame then. So I would animate them as I'm going down here, and then there it is all the way to 560. So once I have that, that's my render cam robot. Let me set that. You can add a little bit of randomness to it. 360 to 560. Make another camera. Turn the ball on. We can do a little bit of focal length here just to kind of fit some more of the stuff into frame. And then we want to animate him walking out. So this is just going to be a very like sweepy kind of motion. So set a key here. Let's say we go to 800. Set a key there. If this turns out to be like a crazy long animation, we'll just render out every other frame. Okay? We don't need to have every single frame in here. 800 is a lot of frames to render out. Okay? Especially with other classes rendering. So 560 to 800 is good. So I'm just going to go in here now, switch to my perspective view, and then just start animating the robot walking out of here. So at 560 to 800 is where I'm going to do that. I'm going to shrink my timeline to 560 so I can just focus on the robot. So however you want to animate this thing, that's how you're going to animate him coming out. Now I'm just going to show how we move him, how we get him to walk. I'm not going to set any keys over here, but you want to make sure that you're setting keys as you're going. Okay, it's very easy because we have so many different things that we're controlling that we forget to set keys. So to get him to walk, I just simply move his foot forward, and then I would grab his pelvis and pull his pelvis forward also, and then pull it down some. Okay, I'm not expecting these things to be Pixar quality animation stuff. You'll see his hands kind of get lost behind. That's fine. We'll pull his hands forward. Okay, so I'd have him walk, let's say, this far, and then I would come back and grab his other foot. Go up a little bit in the timeline, set another key, have his foot come out here. Pull the pelvis forward. Grab his hands, pull his hands forward. Okay, and remember our door didn't open up all the way. I fixed it on mine, but if it didn't on yours, you may have to rotate the pelvis a little bit and have him kind of walk sideways. You may need to add a little bit of spine twist in here to get him to pass that thing, or you may need to pull this back a little bit or whatever. Okay. And then once he's out of there, then you're just going to go down and just show some of his control. So you're just going to grab basically like his hand and animate his hand kind of moving down and moving up, showing off the range of motion that he has. And then you're going to grab this guy and you'll show his fingers curling. Remember, I didn't set up all mine. Okay, so you'll show every single one of the controls that you have on both, not on both sides, on one side of his body. You don't need to do the left arm and the right arm. You can just do one side. Okay, it looks cooler if you do both sides. A little bit of offset in there, kind of like the robot's thinking about it. You want to show the control of this thing moving like this. You'll want to show your clavicle moving. You'll want to show the spine rotating. So you'll want to show this movement. You'll want to show that movement. The first step is just to get the guy out of there, and then the rest of it, you're just kind of playing around with him, kind of like, you know, you wake up in the morning and you're just doing like some stretches. That's what our robot's doing. He's just stretching. He's coming out, and he's just kind of checking out how his body moves, making sure that everything is functional. Okay. Make sure you don't forget about like the heel raise thing or the toe tap. Or this guy here, animating that thing coming up like that. Okay, so it's not too much crazy stuff, but we just want to make sure that we go through and we just show off all of these different things kind of moving around and the robot working correctly. That's our goal. Our goal is to basically just show off how the robot's controls are functioning. And you can overlap them. They don't have to be one right after the other. You can have some overlap. Try to get to look somewhat natural, just kind of flowing from one to the other. And make sure you're just kind of setting keys. Everyone's animation is going to be different. You can have yours start off at the bottom where his feet are kind of like wiggling around, moving up to the knees, moving up to the hips, showing the hips kind of move side to side and maybe rotating, whatever. And then going to the spine, then the shoulders, then the hands, then the elbows, or elbows, then hands, and then maybe even like the neck. If you put a control here so you can grab the neck and just rotate the neck a little bit. Okay, and then that's going to be it. That'll be your animation from start to finish, just to kind of show this pretty quick. Our first scene of this, my robot's out of there because I didn't put him back in. Our first scene of this is that we're coming in, the lights are powering up on the outside, access panel opens up, the digits get pushed, that goes to 180, and then from here to here, this is when the door mechanics are functioning and the door is opening. And then we get a little bit closer as the interior lights and the overhead lights go on. And then we have our robot light, our robot camera, that's showing the robot's lights powering up from top to bottom. And then we have our final camera, which is render cam robot move, and this one's going to go from, like I said, 560 to about 800, just showing him coming out of the box and then just moving around a little bit, just doing a little bit of testing out of his joints, just seeing how everything's working, how everything's functioning together. make sure you pick a good angle that you're looking at him. So otherwise, it might be hard to see. Like here, it might be hard to see if you grab the foot. Let me grab the foot. There we go. If I were to grab the foot and raise it up here, I'm not really going to see a whole lot in some cases. So you just want to be careful that you're kind of at a good angle. It's a better angle here where I can really see, okay, that knee is bending, this hip is rotating, whatever. Okay, so we want to show that off as well. And then if you wanted to, you could always come down to our ground if you have time and hide this box. You don't really need to see that box. Oops, I hit something wrong. There it is. Alright, that box does not want to move. Environment, random objects, no. Door mechanics. Motor housing, there we go. And I could hide this motor housing. And I could just do a little rendering of this if I wanted to, just to kind of show that off. Or I can make a separate render layer. Here's my door mechanics. Make a new render layer that's just the door mechanics. Maybe not even the door on here. I don't think I want the door on there. No, I could leave that on. Okay. And just showing this, just to kind of show that off so that if I wanted to, I could render a separate pass and then put that into my composite, whatever. Okay. But like I said, I'll show that a little bit later on. Alright, and then that's how you're going to animate your robot. And like I said, you can just go through and save your files as, that's, I'm going to say the easiest way for people, just save your files as something else. And make sure that you're giving these file names something unique. So cam1, 1 to 180, 1, and then this is going to be my 1 to 180 cam. So I would save my file out, render out that camera. Go to camera 2. 181, 180 to 360. Change this to 180 to 360. Render that out. Save it out. Camera 3. Go to my next camera, robot. There we go. 360 to 560. Render that guy out. Okay. So that's it. And then you'll just put that into After Effects, make a movie of all those things together, and you're good. Now, if you want to go through and do a composite with the render passes and all that other stuff, you're free to. There's a video on the server I'll put in there too that's compositing the robot, so you can see some of that as well. All right, that's it.